It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The Iranian plot to assassinate Donald Trump thwarted by the FBI. One man has been charged. A newborn baby, the sole survivor of an Israeli missile attack. The UN says 70% of Gazans killed in the war are women and children. In Amsterdam, emergency measures in place after anti-Semitic violence was condemned by the authorities. The people trafficker described as the best smuggler, jailed for 17 years for organizing channel crossings.
300 guys from a country which we know did not value women. Is my daughter going to be safe?
And the residents furious about a new asylum hotel opened this week, despite Labour pledges to close them. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. There are a few countries in the world that pose as grave a threat to the United States as does Iran. Those, the words of the U.S. Attorney General today, as his department charged an Iranian man over a plot to kill President-elect Donald Trump. Farhad Sharkeri, who is now on the run, told authorities he had been ordered to watch Mr. Trump and given 7 days to come up with a plan to assassinate him. Our U.S. correspondent James Matthews has tonight's first report.
It is the plot to target Trump, its details newly unveiled, and Iran named in a planned assassination. These are some of the images issued in a Department of Justice document that names 3 Iranian men as the would-be assassins of Trump, described as Victim 4. One, Farhad Sharkeri, was told by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to focus on surveilling and ultimately assassinating former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. In a meeting last month, he was told to provide a plan within 7 days. If not, the IRGC would pause its plan to kill Victim 4 until after the US presidential elections, because an IRGC official assessed that Trump would lose the election, and afterwards it would be easier to assassinate him.
That chart's a couple of
Donald Trump has been the target of would-be assassins in the run-up to the election.
Take a look at what happened.
A gunman here in Butler, Pennsylvania, was killed after he fired and hit him on the ear. In September, Ryan Routh was charged with attempted assassination after lurking in the bushes armed at Trump's Florida golf course. US intelligence officials don't believe the Iranian effort to kill Donald Trump is connected to 2 separate assassination attempts in recent months. They believe that the Iranian plot is rooted in the killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard while Donald Trump was president. The assassination in January 2020 has stirred an Iranian desire for revenge. Several weeks ago, Donald Trump was briefed on a state-sponsored plot to kill him.
We've been threatened very directly by Iran, and I think you have to let them know, because the best way to do it is through the office of the president, that you do any attacks on former presidents or candidates for president, your country gets blown to smithereens, as we say.
In a response to the latest developments, Trump's communications director said, President-elect Trump is aware of the attempted assassination plot by the Iranian terrorist regime. Nothing will deter President Trump from returning to the White House and restoring peace around the world. For a president-elect preparing for government in Mar-a-Lago, the threat of criminal prosecution has begun to lift. Special counsel Jack Smith has called for court dates to be cancelled while he considers his next move in the January the 6th election interference case. The policy of not prosecuting a sitting president should give protection to Trump on that case and on others. It is the power of the presidency, and for Donald Trump, it extends beyond politics.
And James is in Fort Lauderdale in Florida tonight for us. James, authorities believe that this is part of a bigger effort to target not just Donald Trump, but government officials on U.S. soil.
Yeah, this was a broad scheme conducted by the Iranian government, effectively, they were at the heart of it, a state-sponsored scheme to murder a number of individuals, Americans and Israelis, on US soil. It was only in October that they said to this individual, who has been interviewed by intelligence officials, he's told them that he was asked or tasked with coming up with a plan to assassinate Trump within 7 days. If he couldn't do it, leave it until after the election. The thinking of the Iranians was that it would be easier to kill Trump after the election because they thought he would lose it. So that's the situation. There is one individual, Farhad Shakeri, who's been speaking to intelligence officials. He is still at large. The other 2 of 3 charged are in custody, and they will proceed through the court process. But this clearly is difficult in terms of diplomacy, as Donald Trump, the president-elect, shapes a policy and shapes a posture towards Iran so important between Washington and Tehran. It can only aggravate relations at a time when that axis, that relationship, is so important on a number of levels, not least in terms of a resolution, of course, to the conflict between Israel and Hamas.
James Matthews with the latest on that story from Florida. James, thank you. To northern Gaza now, and the story of newborn baby Mohammed. He was the only survivor in an Israeli missile attack on an ambulance. He was alone in the burnt-out vehicle for 20 hours before he was rescued. Today, new data from the United Nations revealed how women and children are being disproportionately killed. The UN Human Rights Office says it's so far verified the details of 8,119 people killed in Gaza between November and April, using 3 independent sources. Now, 44% of them were children, 26% women. Of the young victims, most were aged between 5 and 9 years old. And about 80% of people were killed in residential buildings. Now, that's a small snapshot of what's likely to be a much bigger figure. The Hamas Health Ministry says more than 44,000 people have been killed since last October. A warning that Alistair Bunkle's report contains images of dead bodies left in the street.
Mohammed's mother, Rahad, was killed only a few hours after he was born. They were transferring hospitals in an ambulance when it was hit by an Israeli strike. The paramedics tried to save them, but they were hit by a second missile. Mohammed was found 20 hours later, the only one still alive.
Raghad's death was incredibly painful, and it was such a shock to all of us. We had been eagerly waiting for her to welcome her baby, but this was the fate that awaited us. She bled heavily as she wrapped her arms around her son, protecting him from the attack. Her maternal instinct never wavered, guiding her right until the very end. That's why Mohammed survived.
This is the reluctant and forced move to an unknown fate. The Israeli military has ordered people to leave northern Gaza. Those who can pile everything they have onto donkeys and carts. A child's Minnie Mouse rucksack, large blue cartons of water, blankets, and carrier bags stuffed with clothes. The elderly were pushed in wheelchairs, their arms also full with what they could carry. The hospitals are struggling. A wheelbarrow is used to carry an injured girl. She moans in pain from the wounds to her head and arm. Flies circle around the bloodied bandages. There is the smell of death in the air. Enough, enough. Please, for God's sake, stop, this woman sobs. This man's leg trembles in agony, and he cries out. His face is red and raw from the blast of an explosion. His eyes shut closed from the swelling.
We are still under a deadly siege in northern Gaza. We're deprived of water, deprived of food, and deprived of medicine. We're also deprived of the entry of any aid delegations to the Kamal Adwan hospital, and there is not one single ambulance in the northern Gaza Strip.
Northern Gaza is now so empty of human life that stray animals are eating abandoned bodies in the streets. It is all a graveyard. no decency for the living, and no dignity for the dead. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
The King of the Netherlands expressed his deep horror and shock today as he admitted his country failed the Jewish community last night, just as it did during World War II. 62 people were arrested and 5 people taken to hospital after Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans were ambushed, kicked and beaten in the streets in a series of anti-Semitic attacks. Our correspondent Alice Porter reports now from Amsterdam.
Football may be known as the beautiful game, but when Ajax played Maccabi Tel Aviv, Amsterdam turned ugly. The day before the match, a Palestinian flag was torn down and anti-Arab chants were allegedly heard. Then a fight broke out in Dam Square. And Maccabi fans had to be escorted to the stadium by police. But it was after the game that the violence really erupted. Israelis were chased by gangs and attacked. These are the points across Amsterdam where the assaults took place. Our team have geolocated these incidents. Dutch and Israeli authorities say it was a pogrom.
This is anti-Semitic violence, and those are the words I choose every time, and I do that very consciously. Or that against the background of the Israeli conflict with Palestine, that will undoubtedly play a role in it. But I actually do not think that is important at this time. It is anti-Semitic violence.
Ofek Ziv was hit with a stone as he left the stadium.
Now I'm okay. It's not bleeding so much, but I'm okay now.
What was going through your mind?
We're gonna be dead. Fans get attacked, get humiliating, get robbed, get punched, get kicked.
62 people have been arrested and 5 were treated in hospital with injuries. Emergency measures are now in place for the rest of the day and military police have been deployed. But given the events of Thursday, it's unlikely to reassure Amsterdam's Jewish community. And Israeli officials have urged their citizens to stay inside their hotels. Pro-Palestinian demonstrations have now been banned for 3 days due to fears of violence. Many in Amsterdam's Muslim community are shocked by what's been happening in the capital.
People get beaten. People are in the hospital. I heard the news. People are in the hospital. And I ask, why? But now it's political. Because the war in Gaza, what has nothing to do with Amsterdam?
The events on Thursday in Amsterdam have reignited concerns over growing anti-Semitism. Tensions between communities have been building since the war in Gaza.
Tomorrow, 86 years ago, was Kristallnacht, an attack on Jews just for being Jews on European soil. It's back now. Yesterday, we saw it on the streets of Amsterdam.
Violent scenes like these could be a more common sight in Europe. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Labour promised in its election manifesto to end the use of hotels to house asylum seekers. But without any warning, this week, a hotel in Altrincham near Manchester cancelled all its bookings to house 300 male migrants who recently crossed the Channel. Well, it's led to anger among local residents, many concerned about their safety. Sky's home editor Jason Farrell has been speaking to some of them and to the men who they say must leave.
What happens when a hotel in a market town becomes a hostel for migrants? In Altrincham near Manchester, residents have just discovered that hotel bookings, meetings and even wedding receptions have been cancelled. And without warning to locals, 300 male asylum seekers have started to move in. So they've called a meeting in a nearby church with the local community police officer.
300 guys from a country which we know did not value women.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's the hard... No, I'm sorry. Is there going to be a curfew Or are they just at 7 o'clock at night, just going to be able to wander around? Is my daughter going to be safe when she goes into Altrincham and has a few drinks? No, is the answer.
We can't lock people up who haven't committed any crimes. We cannot impose on them and restrict their movement if they haven't committed any crimes.
I just find it frankly unbelievable. There's a lollipop man on the doorstep because that's how close the primary is. There are 2 all-girls schools within 10-minute walk. They have to go past an at-risk area.
I can assure you we've had asylum seekers in Trafford for several years and there has been no spike in crime.
Are they really seriously on another planet?
There are concerns too about adding pressures on local GP services.
And they come in the country and get what I want, to see a doctor.
But refugees are welcome in Altrincham, according to banners outside the church.
When you're saying that refugee and asylum-seeking men should be vetted to make sure that they're not paedophiles, I think that's racist.
Gwyneth and Roger Roper had a Ukrainian family in their home for 14 months and say they welcome documented asylum seekers.
I would be really cross if somebody was thinking that I was racist because I'm sat in a meeting wanting questions on something that has been totally blacked out from us.
Unaware of any local uproar, the men at the hotel spoke of treacherous journeys to reach the UK. Some saw people drown in the channel, and this Kurdish man said traffickers beat him, forcing him onto a boat at gunpoint, but said the people of Altrincham had been welcoming and respectful. Then, in contradiction, "Get back on the boats," someone shouts from a passing car. Labour said it would end the use of hotels for migrants, but blames this move on a backlog from the Rwanda policy, which halted many asylum claims. The thousands crossing the channel on small boats has caused heated national debate, but that sharpens when it becomes a local issue. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
He was lauded by his friends as the best smuggler and used testimonials to advertise on social media. But today, a people trafficker from Preston was jailed for 17 years for organising migrant channel crossings. Fraser Maud reports.
Celebrating his success with gunfire and song. The man firing the pistol is Amanj Hassan Zada, known to the people he helped to illegally enter the UK as Amanj Zaman. His colleagues sing his praises, calling him the #1 smuggler, the best agent, and a brave man whose enemies fear him. Today, Zada was found guilty of 3 counts of assisting the illegal immigration of 7 people into the UK in November and December last year. Such was his arrogance, he put adverts for his illegal services online, using testimonials from the young Kurds he'd helped to cross multiple borders. Travelling however necessary, even at times by yacht, the immigrants, few carrying identification, moved through Turkey, Greece, Macedonia, Serbia, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Poland, Germany and France, then eventually by dinghy across the Channel.
You're under arrest on suspicion of arranging and facilitating the illegal immigration into the United Kingdom.
The National Crime Agency had been surveilling Zada for several months before it eventually arrested him at his home in Preston in May. It believes he's responsible for many more illegal crossings.
This conviction is an example of how seriously organised immigration crime is taken, and it is a message to others involved in organised immigration crime that the National Crime Agency will look to identify them, will look to gather evidence of their offending, put them in front of the courts and ultimately convict them to terms of imprisonment.
People trafficking, particularly across the English Channel, is a lucrative business. This week, the Prime Minister promised millions of pounds more in funding to smash the gangs who've been responsible for almost 30,000 illegal crossings this year. On the 3 days that Zada's passengers made their crossings, so too did over 1,000 others. Sentencing Zada to 17 years in prison, His Honour Judge Jeffrey's KC told him that he had no doubt that his motivation was purely financial and not humanitarian in any way. He said that deterrence had to form a strong part of his sentencing procedure. The judge and the immigration authorities hope this case will show other people smugglers that, like Amanzada, they're not above the law, and that they too will soon have little reason to celebrate. Fraser Maud, Sky News, Preston.
Parents struggling with the unfair cost of baby formula have backed a call from the UK's competition watchdog for the market to be urgently reformed. Experts warn the current system is punishing the very people it's supposed to protect. Our national correspondent Tom Parmenter, who first revealed how high prices were driving families into financial crisis, has this report.
The baby formula market needs to change. Parents know that, but the Competition and Markets Authority is now backing them, intervening to revolutionise the market. That means better competition to bring prices down and clearer nutritional advice so parents know what they're buying.
You go into this world, you are pregnant, you have a baby, and then it is literally like, what milk do I buy? Do I buy the more expensive one because is that going to be better? Do I buy the cheaper one to kind of save myself some money? Is there a difference between the two?
You just don't know.
You've absolutely no idea. You have no idea, and it's such a scary world being a new parent.
The prices range from £7 to £19 per tub. But infant feeding specialists say the price range is unjustifiable because they are all nutritionally equivalent.
It's just unfair, the whole thing. There should be affordability. Everything is about affordability these days, and babies included. I think all the prices should be on an even keel, on a level.
It's a heavily regulated product to try to promote breastfeeding. But that regulation is costing those who do formula feed.
For very good intentions, we've ended up with a regulatory system that is actually punishing the people it purports to help. And now is the time to really look at that framework and to overhaul it and to make sure we have a policy and a market that works for women, their babies and their families.
The CMA's recommendations are far-reaching, from reviewing regulations to bold ideas like a price cap or a new not-for-profit nationalised brand of formula milk. The manufacturers say the market is competitive, but will work with the CMA and do what they can to help families. The demand for help is still high. Kidsbank in Chester is continually packing up emergency supplies. They want this report to compel UK governments to take action.
I would urge them to put themselves in the shoes of a family who is struggling to not only make ends meet, but feed their child. As parents, all we want is for our children to be happy, to be healthy, and that's something that they have in their power to help support.
This is no longer a hidden crisis. It's out in the open, paving the way for tangible change. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Chester.
The Metropolitan Police has referred itself to the police watchdog after receiving complaints from 2 women. The referral relates to previous police investigations into allegations against the former Harrods owner, Mohammed Al-Fayed. Around 21 women have contacted the Met, making allegations against Al-Fayed, including rape and sexual assault, between 2005 and 2023. The former TV producer Richard Hall has been ordered to pay damages worth £45,000 to Manchester Arena bombing survivors Martin and Eve Hibbert. He had claimed that the terror attack, which killed 22 people in 2017, was staged and that victims were unharmed actors. Both Martin and Eve suffered life-changing injuries in the attack. The Irish president formally dissolved Parliament today ahead of a general election to be held on November 29th. On polling day, voters will elect Irish MPs, known as TDs, in 43 constituencies, with each constituency having between 3 and 5 TDs. Now, in total, 174 TDs will be chosen, up from 160, to account for a boom in the population. TDs are elected using a proportional representation system, where voters voters rank candidates in terms of preference. Three parties, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party, currently make up the coalition government, while Sinn Féin leads the opposition. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy has been finding out what voters really care about.
Weeks of speculation finally brought to an end. The Irish are heading to the polls for a pre-Christmas election.
I will now travel to Áras an Uachtaráin to advise President Higgins, pursuant to Section 2 of Article 13 of our Constitution, to dissolve Dáil Éireann to allow a general election to be held on Friday, the 29th of November.
Simon Harris calls this election with the coalition government parties riding high in opinion polls and the main opposition party, Sinn Féin, battered by internal scandals and low polling numbers. Its leader, though, defiant in calling for change.
People have a choice. People can vote to change the government by voting for Sinn Féin and then opening up the possibility and chance to put things right.
By most metrics, Ireland is booming, but it suffers from a chronic and persistent lack of housing. Many young Irish find it impossible to gain entry to the market.
Password.
At a speakeasy in Dublin, we met one member of a generation which feels locked out of home ownership and will be voting accordingly.
I have resigned myself to the fact that I will never be on the property ladder in this country. The fact that both myself and the majority of my staff have no security in where we sleep, and the fact that the small businesses are being run into the ground, they're your two. That's it, so far as I'm concerned. Everything else can go to pot.
It's been a year since the Dublin riot, and since then there have been vocal and at times violent anti-immigration protests amid a surge in asylum seekers. Immigration could feature prominently for the first time in an Irish general election. Despite all these issues, the government heads into this election in buoyant, if not bullish mood. It can point to a chunky budget surplus, full employment and a booming economy.
I think this is going to be one of the most exciting and one of the most closely fought elections in recent years, in many years within Ireland.
Nick Miller was Leo Varadkar's press secretary for 7 years.
I think the government parties have a good chance of being returned in some form, perhaps with or without the Green Party, perhaps with independents or another smaller party or some other such combination. But they're certainly going to have a fight on their hands.
Things can change rapidly during a campaign. Where the undecided voters go could be key. But at the moment, the government is confident. It feels like it's theirs to lose. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
Now, you may be wondering why the weather has been particularly grey and miserable of late, and no, it's not just that time of year. The phenomenon has a name, anticyclonic gloom. Well, it happens when high pressure traps a layer of moisture near the Earth's surface, bringing a prolonged period of dull weather with pockets of mist and fog. And it means that places like the village of Odium in Hampshire have recorded just 12 minutes of sunshine in the past 11 days. But there is a glimmer of light on the horizon. Forecasters say the cloud will soon begin to clear, with plenty of sunlight expected on Monday. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by Conservative Home's Deputy Editor Henry Hill and The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. And among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Times. The headline, Iran plot to kill Trump. We'll be right back.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, our top stories. The U.S. Justice Department has charged an Iranian man in an alleged plot to kill President-elect Donald Trump. Police in Amsterdam have launched an investigation into multiple incidents of violence against Israeli football fans. And an Iranian national from Preston has been jailed for 17 years for organizing migrant crossings of the Channel. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Conservative Home's deputy editor, Henry Hill.